Good morning, everybody. So glad to be here as we're talking about something that's very important to Erin and myself, as well as our elected DA, Michael Doherty, and talking about the interactions between mental health and behavioral health and the criminal justice system. What is important for us is recognizing at the lower end of that, we never want to see a situation where we're criminalizing mental illness. Unfortunately, we know that the criminal justice system is going to get involved. We know law enforcement is going to be called. That's why we're so supportive of the co-responder program that you heard about earlier. But when people are coming into the criminal justice system, we want to be able to have off-ramps in order to recognize that this is more of a behavioral health concern than it is a public safety concern. Now, sometimes those don't always converge where we expect, right? At lower ends of the spectrum, there's ways for us to do diversion programs, there's ways for us to deal with this through competency. Becomes much more difficult within the criminal justice system when we're talking about more significant impacts to the community, to a victim, more serious crimes. But specifically for today, in our short time that we have with you, we want to focus on two areas where we're responding to mental health concerns of individuals coming into the criminal justice system. That first is going to be through our diversion program, and specifically our DOORS mental health diversion program that Erin's going to talk to you about in a minute. But I'm going to talk to you first a little bit about our new competency court. Before I do that, though, I want to talk about our diversion programs because it really is a model that has been followed across the state of Colorado and even nationally. Erin's done a great job for us in terms of providing this to some of our partners in Colorado and also doing a number of national trainings about our diversion model. It's a model that really starts with accountability, recognizing that somebody is saying, yes, I made a mistake. Yes, I want to get treatment, I want to get services, I want your help, and yes, I'm willing to repair harm. I recognize that I've created a harm to the victim, a harm to the community, a harm to family members, whatever the circumstance may be, and I'm willing to repair that. And that's why we talk about it as our diversion and restorative justice unit, and those really go hand in hand when we think about our diversion participants. When we're looking at our mental health diversion population, that level of accountability is a little bit more flexible than when we're looking at our other diversionary programs that Erin will just very briefly touch on in a little bit, where accountability is much more a core component of that. But similar to what we heard Christine just talk about, we need to have individuals that are willing to engage with us, that are willing to accept our services, to recognize that there's something they need treatment on. And so on one level, that's mental health population through our DOORS diversion program. On another level, it's lower level offenders, either limited criminal history, not significant criminal justice involvement, and not very serious, the most serious charges that you would see within the criminal justice system that we're diverting into that.
So can you hear me? With our diversion programs, this is a pre-sentence, pre-trial program that is keeping the case out of the system and off of the person's record as long as they're completing whatever requirements or interventions that we're providing. We've really done a lot of work over the past 10 years to figure out what our program model is, what are we trying to provide, because we are situated in the legal system. We aren't mental health providers, so we're really focusing on getting folks connected with the right level of intervention with a community-based provider to address whatever they need. So we're really looking at if it's around substance use, if it's around behavioral health, getting them connected with a service that can continue beyond diversion, because we're wanting to get out of the person's life as quickly as possible. So we've been expanding baby steps over the years and have really grown our program dramatically. We divert almost 800 cases a year now. We had a dip during COVID, but we're diverting most of our juvenile cases. Overall, we have very high successful completion rates. 92% of our participants in our diversion tracks successfully complete. That means their case is dismissed. So we're avoiding those collateral consequences, or at least reducing them, around housing access, around education access, around being able to get a job, being able to get financial assistance, all of those sorts of things that we know a criminal record can significantly impact. We also are, like Christian said, we're really focusing on repair of harm. So we're wanting to meet the needs. We're the DA's office, so we're wanting to also really meet the needs of victims, folks who have been affected by crime, taking into consideration the, the context with which a defendant, a person who committed a crime is doing what they're doing, and having compassion for that and trying to meet those needs. But we also have an obligation to the folks who are affected by crime to try to make things as right as possible. So really trying to support accountability, meet people where they're at in terms of accountability, and also take steps to repair harm where we can. And the folks who go through our restorative justice program, you can see victims and community satisfaction with that is really, really high. So we're very proud of that. And this just shows our growth over the years, the way we've been trying to expand. We had a big dip during COVID, of course, with the way charging was happening was different at that time, but we're still growing. So we're trending in a really positive direction.
All right, so jumping into our competency court process, this is a partnership between the Boulder County court system, the DA's office, and our local public defender's office, the Boulder office of the State Public Defender's Office, really trying to take a different approach as we look at competency. You've probably heard a lot recently about competency within the criminal justice system, and there's some very valid concerns about that, a lot of conversations about how that should work. Unfortunately, what you see in the news are the very serious cases where somebody may be incompetent and committing serious crimes, and those are being dismissed. There was a story last week that was local here that just happened in Weld County where somebody was released after an attempted murder charge. We heard a few weeks ago about somebody who was alleged to have tried to kidnap a child, but was long-term incompetent, and that case had to be dismissed. Those are certainly the extremes of the competency process, and that's something that I fully expect our state legislature is going to look at come January when they're back in session. But again, those are the extremes. We also recognize that there are individuals who are engaging in lower-level conduct that is being driven by their competency, not as a public safety risk, not as trying to create victims or victimize individuals, but because of their mental health condition that is causing their competency, that is also causing their offending behavior that's wrapping them into the criminal justice system. So what we recognized is that with a lot of those individuals, the focus had so often been on restoring somebody to competency, getting them evaluated either to be found competent or incompetent. If they were found incompetent, then working with state hospital doctors to restore them to competency. That really only asks two questions. That asks, does this person understand the criminal justice system, the nature of the charges against them, that sort of thing? And secondly, are they able to have a rational and factual conversation with their defense attorney to assist in their own defense? That's really what competency is in the criminal justice system. So think about if that's the question that a state hospital doctor is looking at and that they're trying to restore somebody to, that has nothing to do with their underlying mental illness that may be causing their incompetency. So we were spending time, money, effort to restore somebody to this level of saying they understand the criminal justice process. They know my role, the defense attorney's role, the judge's role, the jury's role. And we want to make sure that they can, rationally talk to their defense attorney. But as long as they're meeting that bare threshold, that's the end of it. There was no mental health treatment that was necessarily a component of that. So somebody would be restored and say, yes, I can talk to my defense attorney. Yes, I understand the role of the judge. And then we'd continue with the prosecution. And then if they got probation, then probation would focus on their mental health treatment. But really, we recognized that there was a gap in terms of mental health treatment, and that particularly at those lower level, less public safety risk individuals, the system wasn't addressing their mental health. It was addressing competency, from a legal perspective, but never addressing their mental health. So we said, let's create this court that will allow us to really focus on addressing somebody's mental health and kind of put on the back burner the criminal justice system and the charges that somebody's facing. So again, we're only doing this on somebody where we're recognizing we're not concerned about public safety, and we're not saying this is somebody that needs to go to state prison. Rather, these are the individuals that were going to probation to get mental health treatment, but only after 6, 12, 24 months of sitting in a competency process, not getting mental health treatment. So instead we said, let's focus on doing the mental health treatment up front. And if somebody is successful on that, then we will work to divert that case, similar to our diversion program that we've talked a little bit about with the DA's office, and ultimately dismiss the charges with them, because as you see on the slide, our focus is really on that long-term stabilization, long-term connection to treatment and services, so that they can continue to deal with their mental health. And if somebody is successful in that and engaging with that and making progress, that actually makes the community more safe and will allow us to move forward versus the normal competency process where it was that 6, 12, 24 months of working on competency just to get some kind of resolution in the criminal case, never dealing with the underlying mental health concerns, and then guess what? Within about 3 months, that person was back on a new charge, back into the criminal justice system, back focused on competency, and really never dealing with their mental health. So that's really been our focus. We're at almost exactly a year of having this program. We're seeing some really strong success. We've had, in what we tracked a couple months ago, we've had about a 15% recidivism rate, which is frankly fantastic when you think about the population that we're dealing with, because these are individuals that were probably at the 35 to 50% recidivism rate because they were never dealing with that underlying mental health or behavioral health concern. So we're seeing real progress for those individuals, for the criminal justice system, and for the community by doing this. I would be remiss if I didn't note that really the success of this, it's not just a DA program. It is a collaborative model. I work extremely close with one of the supervising public defenders. We have a great relationship, and she and I are basically the driving forces behind this court, along with our chief judge here in Boulder County. But beyond that core group, it's working with Clinica, who's a strong partner in this. It's working with our jail mental health providers, with our pretrial services program, and our state navigator through the Department of Human Services within the behavioral health services within the State Human Services Department. And so you see we had 13 partners that signed on to the MOU. I'd say about 8 to 10 of those partners are almost always at our court staffings to talk about individuals, providing us information, telling us what services they can help that individual with to try and move them forward in dealing with their mental health. And then lastly, I want to talk about a new initiative that the state has just rolled out. This is not Boulder County specific, but rather statewide through the state Bridges of Colorado and the State Court Administrator's Office. There was a change a couple years ago where if somebody was found incompetent on a Class 2 misdemeanor or on a petty offense, very low-level charges in the state of Colorado, the second they're found incompetent, that case is dismissed. No restoration, no interventions. We could have a very open and honest conversation about our feelings about that and whether that's the right thing or not, but they recognized they couldn't do that in a vacuum. And so they did what they call this wraparound care program, which really works to provide services to those individuals. Instead of using the resources to find somebody incompetent and then dismiss their case within 3 to 6 months, let's not even go the competency route if nobody's challenging this person's competency and recognizes this is mental health related. and set them up with a Bridges liaison through the state that specifically works here in Boulder County to provide wraparound care services, to help them with housing, to help connect them with substance use treatment, mental health treatment, healthcare support, whatever the case may be. A lot of what Erin's going to talk about that we do through our Doors Diversion program is really what the state's doing at that low end of competency for those individuals that would otherwise just be dismissed outright, to provide some services from there. So very quick, and I know I was talking fast, but I wanted to get through it in our short time. I'm going to turn it over to Erin to talk really specifically about our programs directly in the district attorney's office.
It's almost lunchtime, so thanks for being patient with us right before lunch. So we've got a variety of diversion program tracks. So cases that don't rise to the level of competency, but that there's still some, mental health, behavioral health, substance use issues going on. So what we're doing every time someone is referred to diversion, so this is a case that the police have contacted the person, charged them with a crime. We are reviewing these cases when they come to our office to make sure that there's actually probable cause for the evidence that this person has committed a crime. If somebody didn't do the thing they're charged with, then it's not a diversion case. So they're taking enough responsibility to, to be able to participate in the program, and then we're doing risk assessments, so criminogenic risk assessments that are validated across different populations to determine, are they low risk for recidivating, for reoffending? Are they moderate risk? Are they high risk? And then we're looking at the level of the charge. How much harm was caused in their charge, right? Is it a case that was a violent offense, but they're low risk, but we still need to address that harm that was caused to that victim? So we're trying to match the person with the correct level of services when they come through diversion. We have an unsupervised track, so that's lower risk folks, lower level charges. We have supervised diversion for folks who are, falling a little bit higher on one of those scales. And then we have the Doors. It used to be called mental health diversion. We changed the name to try to destigmatize that, and we don't want to, have folks not wanting to participate because of the name. So that's diversion, opportunity for resources and stabilization. I know it's a mouthful, but we're really tailoring it to the person's need and their risk level. So with Doors, which I want to focus on, we're providing intensive case management for those folks for around 6 months. We can do early dismissals, but we're wanting to make sure that we're really getting them connected with community-based services. And these are folks who often have more acute stabilization needs. So we're working on things like housing, access to food, kind of basic care, getting them connected with Medicaid, or if they need, basic documentation, things like that, supporting them. With supervised diversion, though, we do have a lot of folks who are in need of some sort of behavioral health intervention. So we're connecting people with therapy around, substance use, whatever it is. We do have staff as well who, we have a clinic or certified addiction specialist. We have someone working on her cat as well, who are able to provide things like an SBIRT and do additional referrals out to other community-based services as needed. Feel free to jump on in if I miss anything. But our model is really combining that service with repair of harm and doing both of those things. And there's a lot of research out there now over the years, which has been wonderful to see it develop in the field, that shows that it works when we are combining these two things. So again, trying to minimize the amount of time that we're in somebody's life so that we're not deepening their system involvement, because we know that that leads to worse outcomes for people, but also really trying to address what's happening so that it doesn't happen again. The number of folks who are involved in the criminal justice system, as I'm sure you all know, there's, the incidence of mental health issues in the general population versus people in jail, big difference, right? So I think it's 44% in jail versus 18% of the general population have mental illness. With substance use, it's 6%, I think, of the general population compared to 63% of folks in jail. Really high numbers. I just looked those up on SAMHSA. I hope I'm saying them right to make sure I was quoting the right numbers before I came up here. But with Doors, we're really targeting those folks who have more acute mental health symptoms that might be contributing to them committing that crime. So a lot of times we'll have somebody maybe with auditory hallucinations, and they're on the Pearl Street Mall and they're yelling at someone, and so they're charged with menacing or they're charged with harassing. harassment, the symptom is what is driving that behavior, right? Their mental illness is driving that behavior, not an intent to cause harm, not an intent to, to disrupt and affect community safety. So really wanting to get those folks, either they're experiencing an onset of mental health issues for the first time maybe, or someone who's been kind of going through the system repeatedly for low-level offenses over the years, and we're really wanting to try a new approach for those folks. So criminal history is not a bar to participation. Someone can have past cases, past criminal history, and could still potentially be part of our diversion programs. It's really dependent on how much supervision they've had in the past, what's been effective, and what we can provide with diversion. We take a harm reduction lens to substance use, so we do not require abstinence, we do not require sobriety, we are not doing UAs for folks. We are really meeting people where they're at. Again, we have a CAT and a CAS on staff who are providing harm reduction. We actually received a grant through Boulder County through the opioid settlement funds to hire a harm reduction diversion coordinator, who that's her entire caseload. Youth and adults who either substances were involved in the offense, or they have some sort of substance use needs going on. So really want to focus on that. We have Narcan and everything on site. And we're tailoring the requirements of the program to that person's specific needs and the harm from the offense. Doris cases, again, we've got a really strong upward trend here. We had a dip last year because we lost funding for one position, so we had capacity issues. I'm sure everybody knows about all of that, but we're really growing this program. I think I've talked about some of this already. There's no ineligible drug use around access to diversion. There's not like, oh, well, if you're using meth, you can't participate. We will, anybody can come through diversion as long as they meet the other requirements that we have. And we're not going to always revoke if there's a new substance use charge. We know that recovery is a process. We know that folks are at different stages along that, and we know that use will continue in certain cases. And so as long as there's not an increasing public safety risk and we're still able to address the needs that someone has, we can keep them on diversion. We are keeping details of people's use confidential. So we have a firewall between our diversion unit and the rest of the DA's office around information that's shared. We are still mandated reporters, of course, but we really keep all of that separate. And then we're using restorative practices, which is something else we're really proud of in our program. So incorporating that into all of our diversion tracks, taking an approach that's not focused on punishment, but that's focused on accountability, understanding of impact, repair of harm. We're involving direct victims in the process as much as possible. We give them a menu of options for how to be involved to the extent that they want to, if it's just providing a victim impact statement, or if it's participating in a restorative justice conference, being able to meet face-to-face with the person who committed the offense, ask them questions about what happened and get answers, and then create a plan for what that person is going to do to try to make things as right as possible, so that everybody hopefully has their needs met. Lots of research now. I'll go past this. I've mentioned a couple of these already. And I guess I'll put a plug in for our volunteer program real quick. We do have a wonderful team of restorative justice volunteers who are trained to participate as community members in the Restorative Justice Conference. How many people are familiar with restorative justice? Yeah? Oh gosh, that's fantastic. Okay, I love that. So we will train people up to participate as a community member. You can really bring your perspective just as someone who lives or works in Boulder County. What is it like when you hear about this offense? How is the community affected? What's the ripple impact? What are your concerns and hopes for this person who committed this offense, or for this person who was affected by this offense? What are your ideas for what could happen to repair harm and rebuild connection in the community? So if you're interested in that, our contact information will be on the slides, and please send me an email. We also have a facilitator training for restorative justice if you're interested in actually facilitating the conferences. That one's a lot longer, 20 hours. We do surveys for folks when they come through our diversion program, and I'm so proud of this. These are all anonymous and voluntary. There is no carrot or stick for folks. around submitting these, and we get these incredible outcomes and these incredible statements from people about the impact of this program on their lives. So really, really proud of this. 95+% of folks say that they are safer about substance use. They've made positive changes in their life. They're connecting more with community. Relationships are improved. They're making better decisions. They're learning new skills. And I wanted to give a couple of quick examples. So these were cases that, oh, okay, thank you. Yep, we're done. Last 2 slides. Yep. So this defendant was charged with felony menacing. This is a similar case to what I described before. And criminal mischief, was experiencing auditory hallucinations and some delusions, and took a baseball bat to his parents' house. Very scary for the parents. They needed support. Called the police. This person was charged, and this defendant participated in our DOORS program. We met him where he was at in terms of the accountability. He took as much accountability as he could, but we got him connected to treatment, supported medication. He did some repair around giving back to the community. Again, that's something that's really tailored to the individual and their ability. We have a required statutory fee for victims, but that's completely sliding scale. This was actually waived for this person. And then support around anger management, violence, preventing violence, and some victim empathy. And he had his case dismissed, and so it's not on his record. Yep. So please reach out if you have any questions or if you'd like to volunteer for our program. Thank you so much.